Emily Roberta Richards was a 22-year-old from Chicago, Illinois. She worked at a car dealership and was fairly independent for a woman of the 1960s. In early 1964, Emily went missing. The FBI even got involved. She was never seen again. Or was she? I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. My job as the host of Unfound is to bring you the truth and facts about disappearances. This often means touching upon the less than attractive qualities of the missing people that were known to everyone well before the disappearances occurred. However, sometimes the opposite happens. The interviews reveal details about the missing people that were not known until after the disappearance happened. People living double lives, things like that. Some examples. Ashley Kohler, seemingly working as a secretary, but she was actually a call girl. David Schrader, seemingly had kicked his alcoholism years before, only for his kids to find beer bottles and such hidden around his house after he went missing. Stephen Kocher, seemingly a religious young man with nothing to hide, yet his phone records eventually revealed he had been hiding quite a lot for quite a while. And most tragically, Tyler North, who had gotten divorced but had secretly been still seeing his ex for sex. And I'm sure you can find other examples like this in Unfound's catalog. Well, with Emily Richards, hers might be the most extreme example of this yet. In fact, her entire disappearance is more than meets the eye. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. Emily Roberta Richards, maiden name Jordan, was a fine upstanding member of the Illinois community. She paid her bills. She loved her family, although there were divisions within it. Emily had a job. Really, the only unique part of her, at least what everyone thought at the time, was that unlike many of the women of that era, Emily lived her own life and had no plans of getting married, although she did have a guy who hung around with her once in a while. His name was Bruce. Really, Emily was the last person anyone thought would go missing. So, in early 1964, Emily's life was as it had always been. Then one day, Emily was gone. She took nothing with her. Her roommate, a female, had no idea what happened. It wasn't until the FBI showed up at Emily's family's front door that a different Emily was revealed. She had been helping her man Bruce, who was actually married, forge checks and other forms of bank orders. Bruce had gotten caught right around the time Emily disappeared and went to jail for a year. She was never seen again. The belief was that Bruce killed Emily in an effort to save himself. Almost 50 years passed before everybody involved found out how wrong this original thinking was. When you take an interest in disappearances, either as an amateur or professional, you welcome surprises, facts and evidence that come out of nowhere. This is especially good if you haven't moved your own personal investigation forward in a while. However, what happens when that surprise only makes everything more difficult? Keep that in mind as you try to answer these three questions during the interview. Number 1, why did the FBI in 1965 not discover what an amateur investigator did 50 years later? Number 2, How are we to account for there being no records for Emily after 1966 and for Bruce between 1966 and 1975? And number 3, could the original story be true, but that it actually happened a few years later? Emily's family continues to be stunned by the recent discoveries and isn't sure what to think. The guest for this episode is Emily's cousin, Amy Spanfelner. Unfound News. The newest episode of the YouTube series Unfound now is out. I analyzed the November 2022 disappearance of Christopher Miller from Janesville, Wisconsin, who went missing while being chased by police. Please watch the video, comment, and give it a thumbs up. Next, if you can believe it, I'm getting business cards. Not sure how I'm going to use them, not sure who is going to get them. I'm not sure if a podcaster even needs business cards, but these cards sure look fantastic. Finally, I'm on the verge of producing a course on podcasting for Teachable.com. It will take anyone who is thinking about getting into what I do from the conceptual stage the whole way to marketing and monetizing. I hope you will check it out when it's available. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound a cousin of Emily Richards, Amy Spanfelner. Amy, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
For the listeners, I was just telling Amy before we started, she is the second of 3 Amys that we'll be having on Unfound in this very early year, very early times of 2023. I don't know why these things happen sometimes to have guests with the same name within like weeks of each other. That's just how it worked out. But Amy, welcome to this episode. Let's just start here. Tell the audience just about the current situation of Amy Spanfelner, as much as you can reveal about yourself, your life, and of course, I think people want to know about you first.
Sure. I first and foremost am a mom and a wife, so that keeps me very busy. I also help manage our construction company, and we build custom homes, mostly local custom homes, so we don't have to travel too far. And that also keeps me very busy. So right now is like year end, quarter end, tax time, audits, you name it.
Right. And I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to do this interview.
Oh, it's a great opportunity. So
well, thank
definitely
you.
didn't want to pass it up.
Thank you. So when you say custom homes, I think most people think of homes these days like these. You design them like your company, you and whoever else design these homes like from the ground up. Somebody comes to you with like an idea, and then you make it happen.
Yeah. Typically we have clients that come to us and they already have their blueprints ready. Not always. So we do a little bit of the design process as well. And we basically give them a builder package and a contract to build what they bring to us. We do some like what you referred to as little box homes. They're called like a speculation home where we own the property, we build it, then we sell it.
Okay.
So
okay. And how long
different.
Is your entire family involved in this?
No, just my husband and I.
Oh, okay.
It's
and
a
how long have you been?
2-person show.
2-person show, okay. And how long have you been doing that?
Let's see, since 2004 when we met.
Wow, good for you. 19 years in the building business. So you've seen the ups and downs and real estate crashes and all of that.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to ask, being that everybody in the while is going to find out that you've been working on your cousin Emily's disappearance for over 10 years now. Is there anything in your work experience or anything that has helped you doing this, or are these like 2 totally different things?
You know, they are 2 totally different things. I would probably actually say that my research with Emily has probably actually helped me on the construction side, just for troubleshooting and finding new avenues to get new product.
Yeah. Okay.
Like sleuthing, basically.
Yeah, sleuthing, right? Okay.
Yeah,
very good. All right, and the listeners know that sometimes, not very often, but we do have people who come into a disappearance well after the disappearance has happened. Maybe they were just 2 or 3 years old at the time. You were not born at the time in the mid
Correct.
1960s. I was not born at the time in the 1960s. But we'll get into that a little bit later. How you all came upon this and decided to make this something important
Sure.
in your life. But what have you learned about Emily? I'm guessing there are many family members who are still alive who knew her. Maybe she had some brothers and sisters who you might been able to talk to. What have they told you about Emily? What was she doing with her life, her personality, and everything? What have they told you? What have you learned about Emily?
We kind of have a split family when it comes to maybe Emily's character and what she was doing at the time. There was a little bit of a division in the family. From what we've been told, Emily, from family back in Illinois, that she was kind of a black sheep. Her and her mom didn't get along. Family dynamics weren't that great. She lived with her grandma for different periods of time throughout her childhood.
Oh,
So it was stressed, is all we know, and we're not sure if that was just a struggle in teenage years or if there was another dynamic there we're just not aware of. So there's that side of it. Her younger sister will not talk to anyone about her. She has voiced that you people, probably being me and my father, need to leave her alone. She's not
okay.
interested in talking about it. She says, Emily abandoned my mom and was horrible to her, and I don't want anything to do with her. So there's that.
Okay, yeah, and this is not the first
Um,
time a guest has expressed something like that.
yeah,
It's not something that we get into on Unfound because we don't like to make waves or anything, but many of the guests who come on Unfound are the only person or one of a very select few in a family who care about finding their missing, family member.
right.
So
Yeah.
this might be more common than you realize, but yeah, okay. And maybe I
Yeah.
should ask you this:
Um,
how are you related to Emily?
so I am actually first cousin once removed. So her and my father are first cousins, sharing their parents were siblings that married siblings.
Okay. All right. Thank
So
you. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So there was some family tension happening in, let's just say, the early 1960s. You
Yeah.
mentioned she had some tension between herself and her mother. What about Emily and her father? And maybe we'll just go right with that. What about her father?
Yeah, as far as I know, it wasn't so much on that aspect, but he was at the time a long haul truck driver, and so he really wasn't around too much,
Mm,
which could have been part of the problem, but I've never heard that the relationship there was ill-fated or anything.
okay.
So, mostly just between her and her mom.
Okay. But her parents were married.
They were married up until the early 60s.
Okay. So they got divorced. So at the
They
time,
did.
all right. So at the time, we'll just keep this simple, of 1964. By that time, her parents were divorced.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And you did say that here in the 21st century, we're doing this interview, by the way, for everybody on February 1st of 2023, that the younger sister does not want to talk anything about this. Maybe we can understand that. But does Emily have any other siblings?
Um, she had three other brothers. Two are deceased. One, I have not been able to locate.
Wow, so Emily is
Yeah.
still missing here, and then she has a brother who
Yes.
nobody
And
knows where he
he,
is either.
my dad kind of explains him as a little bit of a wild card. You never really know what you're going to get when you contact him.
Okay, all right.
So
Okay,
I've
and
I've searched a little bit, but I haven't found anything. Um, I haven't made any contact.
okay. Would he have been an older brother or younger brother of Emily?
Youngest.
Youngest. Okay, so there's at least a decent chance if he's taking care of himself, no accidents, that there's a decent chance he might be alive, but he is not
Yes,
missing in the same sense that Emily is, correct?
he is not. No.
Okay. Okay. So getting back to Emily in particular, so she has the several siblings, doesn't have a very good relationship with her mother. But what have you learned about? Did she have a lot of friends? Was she popular? Maybe an introvert? Kind of education. Did she go to college or high school? Some of that information. What can you say?
Sure. As far as we know, from like my dad's side of the family, being like himself and his siblings and his mom and dad, Emily visited them a lot and she spent a lot of time with their family, kind of almost like adopting her like a child. And so, their version of her was she was, very nice and very friendly. And she was attending college. I think it was Illinois State Normal University at the
Okay.
time. I think it's different now, but
Okay.
and I think she was in for like business administration, and she had transferred there from Lakeview High School. She was working at Warner's Pontiac in Chicago. It sounds like doing bookkeeping.
Okay.
Had her own apartment with a roommate. And so, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
she made it seem like things were just great.
Oh, okay. So to me, it sounds like, at least the way I understand, I wasn't born until 1970, but it sounds like for a young woman in the early 1960s, she was maybe more independent than most.
I would say
Maybe if
so.
this was the 1970s, 1980s, this all maybe sounds something, but at that time, a little different for women. So she was very independent for that time in our culture.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say that.
Okay. And we're going to talk about her roommate a little bit later. So she's living on her own. She has this job, just providing for herself. And I think it is now just Illinois State University, which
Yeah.
coincidentally a guy went to high school with. His daughter goes there. But where did everybody grow up? What town or city are we talking about in Illinois?
So I think her dad and herself were like Chicago based. Mom, grandma, my dad's family was like Bloomington, Illinois.
Hmm.
So not in Chicago at all, fairly far south from
Hmm.
Chicago.
Okay. I was in Bloomington, Illinois, coincidentally, last July. That's so weird. Okay. All
My
right.
parents were there.
I know there. I went right by the Illinois State campus. I was with a friend of mine from college and one of his sons. It's so weird. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're all
All
from
right, okay. So, she's living her life. Sounds like she plans to graduate from college eventually. She did not graduate. She was going to college when this all happened.
correct.
Okay. So she has this job, bookkeeper at a car dealership back then. So let's move on to this. Let's just talk in general. We're going to get, of course, specific later, but let's talk about Bruce Richards in general. Who is he? What have you found out of maybe about his background before maybe the early 1960s? His age, those things. What have you learned just in general about him?
We learned that he, as a very young child, went into the military, that his mother, basically signed for him to go in because he was underaged.
Hmm.
He falsified his birth date to get in,
Mhm.
and I
Common
think that was
back
by
then. Yeah.
2 or 3 years. But he went in early, and they ranked him high because he was supposedly very, very smart.
Okay.
And so there's several, through Ancestry, we were able to get several of his rankings and years and things like that that he was in and out and in and out and different branches.
Okay.
And so we do know that much from his earlier years.
Okay.
That's about it. We don't have anything college wise, which I'm guessing maybe he didn't go since he went into the military so young.
Okay. Any information that you were able to figure out how he and Emily met?
I don't have any factual information other than at the time they were both working at auto dealerships in Chicago.
Okay. But there's nothing that says they were both working at the same one.
They were not.
Okay. So it could have just been they met at some industry event for local dealerships or something else. He maybe was
Yeah.
looking for a job if he was in sales or something or something, or maybe they met when Emily was looking for a job originally. So we're still not clear all these years later how the two met, but they certainly did know each other. And I have to ask, did your family at the time back in the early 60s know that Emily and Bruce knew each other? Did Bruce Richards' name ever come up in any discussions or anything like that as far as you've been able to tell?
Um, so my side of the family did not know him personally. They'd never met him. And what they had heard of him was from Emily's mom, and she didn't like him. She
Okay.
always would refer to him as names when she brought him up, when it was brought up in family conversations.
Okay.
She
So
didn't
when
like
you
the boyfriend was bad news, whatever.
All right, so your understanding then is back then, the early 60s, that Emily's family understood that there was this guy, Bruce, and he and Emily had some sort of relationship.
Yes.
All right, and he was quite a bit older than Emily, or around the same age, or what?
Older. I think by 11 years,
11 years. Okay,
something like
okay.
that.
That's okay.
Yeah, 11 years.
11 years. Okay. Quite a bit, maybe not crazy. Maybe if it was the opposite way, a woman being 11 years older, maybe that might be a little more unusual, but still, never know.
Yeah.
Okay, but he was married, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what year, if you have it in your notes there, what year did he get married for the first time?
55.
55. Okay. 1955 is when he got married to his first wife. Now, most importantly, as far as you can tell, and I realize that you didn't come back into this until 50 years later, was he
Right.
divorced at the time that he and Emily ended up being a couple, as far as you can tell?
No.
All right, so he's still married, but Emily was his new squeeze.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Maybe that's why Emily's mother didn't care for him too much. Maybe she kind of suspected something like that. Is there any indication that you found that Emily would have known that Bruce was married?
Um, I don't have any documents that would say that she knew he was
Okay.
married. Yeah. And
Okay,
without
so she never,
speculation,
once again,
that's what I got.
never said anything to her roommate, to her mother, to her father, saying, "You know what? Can't believe I'm doing this. I'm dating a married man." Anything like that?
Nope, not that we have knowledge of.
Okay. So let's now move up to 1964 and what I'm calling, at least in the outline that we're following for this interview, the what we're calling the first disappearance. What
Sure.
have you learned about this? It's 1964. Emily, as you said, she has a job. She's going to school. She's living on her own. She has a roommate. I guess she has her own car. She has a lot of great things going for her. And then it seems to me, you can explain it, but it seems to me it's just like one day she was here and the next day she wasn't. What has your family said about this? What have you learned about, once again, this first time in 1964?
Um, well, I guess it would just be the conversations that my father, remembers hearing about her, that she was just missing.
Hmm.
Family, were visited by the FBI. So there was talk of that.
Wow.
What those topics were about, from what my dad remembers and what the oldest brother to my dad remembers, was that she was in trouble with a counterfeit savings bond ring.
Wow.
And they were supposedly cashing checks from Chicago, and they were being tracked to Florida.
Okay. And how shocking was this, if you can tell, how shocking was it for your family to hear that she would have been involved in something illegal? Pretty shocking.
I think for my dad's immediate family, it was shocking. I think for Madeline and Emily's direct, immediate family, it was not, because I think they knew more of what was going on than my dad's family did.
Okay. So she's there one day, she's not there the next. Of course, the FBI, you may not realize this, Amy, but we really don't talk about the FBI too much in Disappearances on Unfound because FBI only gets involved for very, very particular cases, usually involving children. But certainly, if somebody is involved in interstate crime, like it seems maybe Emily was involved in, maybe then they get involved, especially if that person goes missing. Um, was anybody helpful? For example, the roommate, could she offer any insight as far as you've learned back at the time in 1964?
Not that I'm aware of. The only conversation that we have around her was that she had actually called Emily's mom inquiring if she had seen her because she had been missing for several days, not home for several days, and all of her things were still at the apartment.
Okay. Does this, including her car, for example, was her car left behind, or did it seem like she just rode off
Not
into the
sure about
sunset
a
with her?
car.
Not sure about
Yeah,
a
we
car.
don't
Okay.
know. Yeah.
Okay. But the roommate, as far as the roommate could tell, she left most of her stuff behind. So
Yep.
all her clothes are still hanging there, all folded up, anything,
Yep.
everything like that. All right.
Everything's
At,
still
at
there.
at her work, did she, once again, if these are just questions I have to ask, but if you're not
Yeah.
sure in your research and investigation so far, that's fine. Did she give her work like 2 weeks notice, anything like that?
Not able to find that out.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they are long closed.
Right. Right. Pontiac's not even it's not even a brand anymore. General Motors doesn't even have that brand anymore of Pontiac. Okay.
Yeah.
What did your family, as far as an overall consensus opinion, did they think that somebody murdered her? Did they think that she ran away because of these charges? Did they think that she maybe committed suicide because she thought she was getting caught doing something like this? What was the general consensus opinion back in 1964 when she was there one day and gone the next?
I think in the early beginning, they may have thought that she would likely resurface. You know, maybe, took off, either knew what was happening or didn't know, kind of got caught up in it. Um, maybe was told they were going for a road trip and all this was happening and she didn't realize it, or she did. But I think, in the early 60s, I think they just figured, well, the FBI's on it, they'll catch up to him.
Yeah.
She'll probably get in trouble and then, maybe be back home.
Right. Now we should be clear about something. We're calling her Emily Richards, and we'll explain that in a moment. Really,
Yeah.
her maiden name at the time when she went missing is what?
Emily Roberta Jordan.
Emily Roberta Jordan,
Yes.
Jordan. Emily
Correct.
Roberta Jordan. Okay, so at the
Yes.
time she goes missing, they're looking for an Emily Roberta Jordan. And how old was she in 1964?
I think she was 22.
All right, so very young,
Yeah.
pretty young. Okay, so she's there, she's not there anymore, leaves most of her stuff behind. And there's this crime that she is accused of being taking a part in, and coincidentally, it's between Chicago and St. Petersburg, Florida, which is essentially kind of where I live, although I have a Clearwater address. All right, so this is going on, and but I should make this clear now. Going back to Bruce Richards, was it alleged that he was also involved in the same scheme or crime as well?
Yes.
It was. He was.
Yes. An aunt to a great aunt to my father and Emily had been visited multiple times by the FBI from 64 to 65. And they were under the impression that maybe family members were harboring her since they
Yeah,
hadn't found her yet.
of course, sure.
And she was actually, kind of upset that they were still hounding them about it because they didn't know where she was. And they showed up in like 1965 and, they still hadn't found her. They didn't know where she was. And at that time it said the boyfriend. So they obviously knew the boyfriend was
Bruce.
with her and it was her boyfriend.
Right.
That he did a year in jail or prison,
Mhm.
and took a plea deal.
Okay,
So
so I guess what we're saying is Emily went missing in 1964. She's involved in the scheme, and maybe you want to say what this scheme was again: counterfeit savings bonds.
yeah, that's what my dad remembers it. So, it could have been traveler's checks or
Okay.
some kind of counterfeit checks that you could just cash along the way
Okay, so when I start thinking of
in
this,
larger amounts.
I start thinking of something like Catch Me If You Can, that movie. Of course, it was a real life story where guys cashing these counterfeit checks, and the way our Federal Reserve System works, they don't find out it's counterfeit until weeks later, and already the person is gone with the cash, and you just
Yeah.
have to keep doing that to stay away from the law. With Tom Hanks,
Yep.
Leonardo DiCaprio. Of course, that's probably a Hollywood interpretation of what really happened in real life, but maybe that's something that people can think of to maybe try to compare to this. But I guess what we're saying is Emily disappeared, but Bruce didn't disappear. He was actually caught and went to jail.
Correct.
You did. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
And at that
So
point,
please.
um, my great aunt had, you know, said, "It doesn't surprise me you didn't find her. She's probably in the swamp."
All right. So the belief is he's in jail, she's gone, and they're thinking, well, maybe. Once again, we don't theorize, but we can do this
Yeah.
because we know it's going to happen next. We're going to get to what happens next.
Yeah.
But it's theorized in 64 that he was thinking that Emily might squeal or something or snitch or something. So he had to get rid of her, maybe to cover up even more things. But he ended up getting caught, did not, and went to jail, although only for a year, which seems
One
like
year.
a pretty light sentence for something like that to me.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
I guess it would probably depend on the amount of
Yeah.
money. It was a short time period that they tracked him. So, it wasn't going on for months or years. It was more like weeks.
Okay.
So,
Do
could
we
have
have
been
any
traced.
information if the FBI or the police even tried to ask Bruce, well, hey, hey, where's Emily? We know you were had this scheme together. Do you know where she is? Do you know of any statements that ever have come out that Bruce made about Emily at the time?
Zero.
Zero. I also have to ask you this, given that this is Illinois near Chicago, was an allegation that Bruce could have been affiliated with the Chicago mob?
Yes.
There was. Okay, so this
Yeah,
is
there
maybe
are some stories there.
all right, so this could have been an entire mob kind of scheme. It wasn't something hatched necessarily by Bruce. It could have been hatched by somebody higher up that he was involved in it. Okay. All
Which
right, so
for
she's.
me kind of validates it
Please
kind
go
of
ahead. No,
validates
it's
the
your
plea
interview.
deal.
Please.
Yeah, validates the plea deal. I
Okay.
think we all know how those work. You have
Okay.
information that they want, you give them that information, and you take their deal.
Oh, I see. So he might have gotten that year just because he rolled over on somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. That's a very good idea. Okay. So we have already moving on in our outline 1964, 1965. The FBI came to your family's houses, homes,
Mhm.
talking to them. Do you know where Emily is? You've already stated. Are you harboring her? Are you hiding her? Very common. That happens even today, but they now know that Emily was involved in this illegal activity with Bruce. I'll just ask you again, how shocked was your family at the time? In retrospect, were they thinking, maybe Emily did seem to have maybe a couple too many dollars in her pocket compared, being that she's out on her own, anything like that, maybe they noticed in retrospect.
I don't think so. Not,
Okay.
not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. Nobody's ever said anything like that.
No, I think they just thought that, she had worked prior to the dealership at an insurance company. And so, she went to work and made her own money. And I think part of that was, you're not living at home, so
Mhm.
you got to make your way.
Okay. All right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So the FBI gets involved. She's missing. Bruce goes to jail. Doesn't seem like there are a lot of leads, at least at the time. So, what is your understanding for your family between roughly 1965, maybe even 66, up until you started working on this personally? You got involved, and we're going to get into why you did that just here in a moment. But what is your understanding of your family thoughts on this, feelings on this? Did they try to do anything on their own to try to figure out what happened to Emily? What happened during those 45 years?
Um, it was really silent. I think Emily's mom, figured, she got involved with this guy and she didn't resurface, that she was probably dead. And
Mhm.
that was kind of just the family theory because years had gone by and Emily made no contact with anyone. So, no letters, no phone calls, no visits, no nothing
Okay.
from anyone, no friends, no family, completely silent. And
Okay.
so from my grandmother's aspect, they believe she was dead.
Okay. That's a totally
Yeah.
believable. We start talking about crime. We start talking about the mob. If your family knew about it at the time, makes all
Yeah.
the sense in the world. Of course, this guy only goes to jail for a year and then he's getting out. It certainly looks bad for Emily. So let's
Right.
now bring this back to you. How did you You know, I'm guessing you knew about Emily's disappearance for a while, but what was it like around? I have it in the outline 2010, maybe it was a few years before or after that. But what made you get interested in this? Going to devote, you and your husband have your own business. You already have enough work in your lives to do, and congratulations on that. Why did you choose to take this on? We'll start there.
I think it was right about the time that Ancestry rolled out their online platform for building your family tree and documents and people um and my sister and I, I love history and I love, family stories and things like that. And so I signed up for it and started building our family tree and both sides, and then she did her husband's side, and then I started my husband's side,
Mhm.
and as we were building it, the DNA side of it came out
Sure.
probably maybe 2 years later, I think. And so then I'm like, hey, I'm doing this. I got this for Christmas. I'm gonna do it. Do you want to do it? And so we all did it. And
Mhm.
um, it was probably about that time when my dad was like, oh, hey, has anything come up with my missing cousin? And I don't, to that point, I had never really heard any stories. I was very small. My sister remembers it a little bit. She's 4 years older than me. So she was like, oh, well, maybe we should look into that. So it just wasn't talked about a lot. And it wasn't talked about a lot with the younger kids of the family either.
Okay.
Um, and so my sister and I were like, oh, hey, let's make sure we've got all that side of the family in there and get Emily in the tree. And it actually wasn't known until Ancestry that Emily's name was actually Emily because everybody called her Roberta.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So back, is that how what she went by in everyday life back in the early 60s then?
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody called her
Okay.
Roberta. Her mom called her Roberta Jean, which Jean was an uncle.
Huh.
So
Roberta Jean, Gene, I guess.
Gean. I don't know actually. I don't know how it would have been spelled.
Okay. Okay. My mother's
Yeah.
middle
But
name was Jean. That's interesting. Okay.
everybody had a different name back then. Like my grandma's name was Rosemary, but they called her Becky. And one
Okay.
was Adeline and they called her
Uh,
Jane. Like people
uh-huh.
just didn't go by their birth names. They all had like some kind of nickname that they got.
Naturally built-in aliases. Okay, I got you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All
So
right.
when we
All
were
right.
researching and the name Emily came up, my dad's like, well, who's that? And I'm like, well, it's your missing cousin.
Okay.
So they all never knew because they just always heard her name called Roberta.
Okay. So I guess what we're saying here is when you started this, you didn't start getting on ancestry.com and everything to find Emily/Roberta. You
No,
did it
no.
because it was just like, for the reason a lot of people do it. I'm interested in my ancestry. My dad is
Yep.
very much into that. Me, not so much. But
Yeah.
going back to where what countries did they come from, and get your DNA tested. I'm like 60% German or things like that. That's how this all got started.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. And so let's start here with your work. And what year was it? Maybe you just want to give us the exact year now that we've talked about all that.
I think it was 2010.
All right. So I got that right in
Yeah.
the outline. Very good. All right. Way to go, Ed.
Seems like it was.
Okay. So let's start here. We're going to start maybe in an unusual place. We're going to go back to Bruce.
Okay.
And when did you find out that actually, of course, he was only in for a year? He got out of jail. When did you discover? There's my allergies. When did you discover that he had changed his name, and what year did he do this? How did you find that out?
So we didn't actually find that out until later in the research. Probably 2015, maybe.
Wow.
Um, when my father made contact with his brother.
Okay.
Um, it was a phone call to him, multiple phone calls to him.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, this brother was very, he wouldn't just give you information. If you had a specific question, he might answer it, but it was more of a let's circle back and then come back. It was kind of trailing off and then coming back, and sometimes there weren't any real answers there. But at the end of one conversation, he did say, well, Bruce doesn't go by Bruce. He goes by John. And my
Hmm.
dad was like, oh, huh. So he doesn't have he's not using his real name. And he goes, no, he changed his name a while back and he goes by John Ryan O'Brien.
Wow. All right, so he ceased to be
Yeah.
Bruce Richards. Of course, we know that he got married in 55, and we're going to get back to these marriages and things here in a moment.
Mhm.
But then, did it seem to you, once you found this out, you looked him up, does it seem like he changed his name in what year, as best as you can tell?
Um, well, from knowing his alias
Hmm.
and his death date, I was able to acquire all of the records surrounding that, including the Social Security index, death index.
Okay.
And with that, I got the genealogy record and ordered it, and the Social Security record was dated April 1965 for the name change.
Wow. So Emily goes missing in 64, and already a year later, he's changing his name to a name that's nowhere near his real name.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
John Ryan O'Brien. Boy, that's how Irish of him. Okay, so once you knew that, of course, you already knew that he got married in 55. Were you able then to
Mhm.
discover the divorce records of when he got divorced from his first wife?
Yes.
One more.
Yes, I found those as well. Um, Probably a little bit after I learned of the name change,
Okay.
just because I was more focused on, trying to find his location and what he
Yeah.
was doing between 66
Yeah.
and Emily and their marriage and all that. But
Right.
yeah, my focus wasn't on the divorces as much as it
Mhm.
was
Okay.
locating them.
Okay.
But I did get that, and it was out of Chicago, and it was granted. I think she filed for it in 1962, and it was finally granted in 1967.
Okay, and remember that date, everyone, 1967. We're going to come back to it. Now, he ended up getting married again in the 1970s. We have to remember this was Emily and Bruce were a thing in 1964 when she went missing, and this is all going to be important for all the listeners here in a moment. But he got married again in the 1970s. What can you say about that? What year? And what can you say about that?
Well, So after his first marriage, there's the marriage certificate for him and Emily
We're going to
in
get to that. That's going to be the big
1966.
surprise. Yes. We're going to get to that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but what about the 1970s? Yes, please.
So the 1970s, he marries the late wife, and they're married out of Washoe County, Nevada. And that one is dated May 1st, 1976.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And they ended up getting the divorce at some point.
So she filed for an annulment.
Wow.
And the date on that is 1979.
Wow. 3 years she's married and she doesn't want a divorce. She wants an annulment.
Yep.
Meaning, so now, once again, I've never been married, but it sounds weird to me that you could file for an annulment 3 years after getting married. Usually, when I think of annulments, it's like a month in, not 3 years in. Any insight into that? Anything you've been able to find out why they just didn't get divorced instead of an annul? They got the annulment instead.
So I believe in the state of California, you can file for an annulment if any of the information documents people originally involved have falsified any information.
Huh.
So, like, gross neglect and abuse and all those other random physical things, emotional things are a divorce. Like, you file for it and there's like a reason
Okay.
behind it. But I think the code that is on these documents pertains to like false information.
All right. Maybe it's because he changed his name. Maybe she found
Could
out
be.
that could be that we don't know that, but we do know that he changed his name, and maybe she
Yeah.
found out his real name and found out his
Yeah.
his backstory and found out all these other things, maybe that he'd been in jail and everything else. We just don't know. But she got this annulment. It was granted 3 years later. Now, I should ask: does Bruce or slash John have you ever been able to track any children down at all?
No.
Zero.
No. And according to the younger brother that we spoke to, he wasn't aware that he ever had any children either.
Okay. Now, here we come to, and you've already mentioned it, but we're going to talk about it. It's very, very important to all of this because Emily's family thought that in 1964 is when she went missing, but in doing your work all those years later, you were able to find that actually Emily and Bruce got married in California in 1966. So, generally, 2 years after she disappeared from Illinois.
Correct.
Tell everybody how you came upon this. How shocked were you by this? How did that even come about? We'll talk about that first.
Um, so I'd been doing my ancestry research and just, collecting documents, and I had seen the index for a California marriage for a Bruce Richards and an Emily Jordan. And I, just kind of passed it by thinking, well, family thought she was dead. That was Florida, and this marriage is in California. Like, that's a long ways to go. And so
Yeah.
I'd clicked on it and I'd looked at it, and I kind of ignored it for many months. And it kept popping up as kind of like not a hint, but associated with the name. It's kind of how ancestry works. So I clicked on it again, and I was talking to my sister, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna order it. It's like $22. I don't need a certified copy. They'll send it to me, whatever they can, they have to black out anything they can. And so I ordered it. And I remember checking the mail on Thanksgiving because I hadn't checked it in a couple days. And we were on our way to my dad and my mom's for Thanksgiving. And I was like, oh, hey, look, here's that California record. And so I opened it up and I'm reading it, and I just had chills, and I was like, holy crap, it's her.
Huh.
Yeah. And I called my dad and I'm like, you'll never guess what I just got in the mail. And he's like, well, what's that? And I'm like, well, your dead cousin was not dead in 1966 because she married this guy in California. And he was
Wow.
blown away, straight blown away.
Now, what I think about that entire part that you've just mentioned there for the last couple of minutes is that you came across it and kind of blew it off. It wasn't like a eureka
Mhm.
moment because, all of us who cover, research disappearances, we're always looking for that piece of information that might change the narrative. It's a real fact and it like blows your mind, as soon as you see it. For you, it was like a little different. You took a little more convincing, I guess. You went to other things and then
Yeah.
came back to it. Why do you think that is? Because that's really the kind of thing you were looking for, but you kind of just glided right past it.
Yeah, I think there was so much focus and conversations that she was dead, dead in 1964 and the Florida connection, you know, how in the heck did she make it to California? What for? All these things. Um, and so I just, the first few times I seen it, I was just like, probably not her. Also, like, how much money do I personally want to throw at this?
Yeah, yeah, I
you
know
know
the feeling.
so yeah, but I was like, for $22 I'm not out
Hmm.
any lifetime savings or anything. And so I just finally just ordered it because I'm like, well, I'll be out $22 if it's not her, and then I'll know it wasn't her.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so what we kind of to put this in a nutshell, this part of it is that she goes missing in 1964, and it seems that she went to California or somewhere, but ended up in California. Just and she quit your family and everything cold turkey. Just
Yeah.
one day she was talking to everybody. The next she's out of there. She goes to
Yep.
California and just has that kind of self control to
Yep.
not, write a letter, send a telegram, send a postcard, give any indication that she was alive anywhere else, right?
Yeah. Nothing.
Okay. In addition, she's doing this while her boyfriend, married boyfriend, Bruce, is in jail. Wow. Okay. That's tough. That's hardcore. I know as a guy who's covered disappearances for 6.5 years, that is hardcore. Okay.
Yeah.
Now what is confusing though is that it seems like they were both, or she was hiding in plain sight because when on the marriage certificate, she uses her real name, right?
Yes, they both do.
Okay, so what are the names on the marriage certificate from 1966?
His is the Bruce Arthur Richards. And hers is Emily Roberta Jordan.
Huh. So there she is, Emily Jordan living in California. Emily Jordan, fairly common name. Jordan, common last name. Emily,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
common first name. Roberta, I don't know how common a middle name that is back then. I don't know. But is there any indication that you've been able to find, given that the FBI was looking for her, that they knew anything about this? There any indication that they ever went to California, knew about this piece of information, and went out there at the time?
No, no, nothing.
Zero.
Zero. Family,
Okay.
the FBI stopped visiting family in like 1965.
Okay. And then for Bruce Richards, who changed his name to John Ryan O'Brien in 65, he went back to using his Bruce Richards name for this marriage certificate the very next year.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And of course, we have no explanation for that as of 2023.
No.
Zero. All
Yeah.
right. So they get married. And just to be sure about this, and I asked you the first time we talked, were you able to, of course, everybody has to sign stuff when they get married. Your opinion, I realize it's not an exact science. Is the signature that Emily put on that marriage certificate back in 1966, is it similar to the signature that has been able to be found for anything she signed in the early 60s? What do you think?
Um, yeah, so she's on a lot of her school photos that she had given to my grandmother. she wrote a little thing on the back and always put love Roberta. So we had the Roberta signature from that and her letter, and it's spot on.
It is.
Yeah, from the
Okay.
loops and the slant and your starting and stopping points, and
Wow.
it's very spot on.
Okay. All right. Like I said, we know it's not an exact science. It used to be an exact science, but that's kind of changed since the 1970s. If anybody wants to get into a real deep dive on that, I think the movie Zodiac about the Zodiac killer um, is a great dive on how that was so popular back in the 1970s, but not so much now. But still, if it's close, I think we have to go with it.
Yeah.
And where was this marriage certificate? Where was it certified?
It was out of Los Angeles County,
LA County
California.
in 1966.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
After no, so you find this out, and did you tell authorities about it? Have you ever given that information to the FBI all these years later? I'm not trying to get your distant cousin in trouble or anything, but did you ever say, you know what? You might have thought that she was deceased in 64, 65, but I have proof that she was alive in 66. Did you do anything like that?
I never did contact the FBI again after I found this.
Okay. Any reason? I have to ask any reason why? Because they were looking for her. Not
Yeah.
once again. I'd hate to see Emily as however old she would be. Of course, the statute of limitations is probably run out by on that particular crime. I'm thinking, but
Yeah.
still, is that something that's on your mind? Do you intend to do it? I mean, I have to ask.
No, probably not. My first reach outs to them were not informative at all. So,
Okay.
and by the time I was researching and contacting them, it was 40 plus years later. So
Mhm.
everything that they did have was, part of a retention and is long gone.
Okay. All right. So it seems they didn't know about this. Maybe they did. We just don't know about it. I guess that's possible. Maybe they did go out and track her down, but there's no indication of that. And there's no
Yeah.
indication here in 2023 that they've happened upon the information that you did some years ago.
Right.
Okay. So now the big question is after this marriage in 1966, is there any information? I know there were a couple addresses on that certificate, that marriage certificate. I know it even has like their professions at the time
Mhm.
in the LA area. But have what have you been able to find out? What did they do with their lives after their marriage? Have you been able to find anything?
Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I researched both the addresses as much as I could. The detective on Emily's NAMUS case, which we haven't talked about yet,
Yeah.
did a drive-by of the house, basically said, there's nobody still living there that would have been there then. Um, Said he ran her information through their CODA system for, arrests or driver's license. Nothing came up for her name or any various names with her birth date at all.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was just nothing.
Okay.
Property records, back into those days on those locations, they were basically like little apartments,
Yep.
brownstone type buildings, one had 12 units, the other one had like 40 units. So hard to say,
Okay. And so
you
when we
know.
say information, we mean for both of them. So even with
Yeah.
Bruce/John, you really don't, because not to, but we have to say that Bruce is not alive anymore. He is deceased, but there is a record of him like starting in the 1970s. But even for him in that kind of like 8 to 9 year period before he gets married for the third time, you've not been able to find any information on him.
No, from like 66 to about 74, I have nothing for him. And you try researching John Ryan O'Brien in California. There's like a million of them.
Yes, right. That's right. That's right.
So,
And it very well may be that, well, he did end up using that name later, but who knows what name he was using, right?
right.
Who knows? And
And
even when it comes
yeah,
to Emily, um, there's no information. Did she have a job? Did she pay any taxes? No information on that as well.
yeah, I have as far as I know, she has zero earnings on her Social Security record past 1964. I think, and it was like $120.
Okay.
No claims, no money going in, no activity.
Okay. I have to ask if you've researched this. Mid 60s, how easy would it have been for Emily to get a new social security number? Maybe using the same name, or Emily, of course, Emily Jordan, then Emily Richards. Maybe she even changed her name to Emily O'Brien, possibly. How easy would it have been back then to just change social security numbers on a whim?
Very easy.
Okay.
They just had field offices. There was minimal documentation needed. You could go in and say, I need to apply for a job and I don't have my social security number, and they just issue you one. It was not
Okay.
it was not like it is in current day.
Right. Okay.
She did
So
get a different one in Florida
she did.
in that time frame. She had
Okay.
the name changed to the Emily Richards.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yes. That was I think March or April of 1964. She changed her name to Emily Richards.
Okay. And she changed it in Florida.
Florida.
So was she there?
Yes.
Any proof she was there? She was there.
That would be the only proof that I have that she was there.
Okay. All right. So she's Emily Jordan. She changes her name in 64 before she went missing or after she went missing?
During that time that she was on the run,
Okay, on the run.
whatever you want
So
to call it.
okay. All right. So she changes her name to Emily Richards. Once again, not surprising given that she was on
Mhm.
the run. She's changing it to her boyfriend's last name, even though they're not married yet. But ultimately, when they do get married officially, she and he are in California. And she goes back to her original name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That is, and this is maybe the listeners are already figuring out this is why it's so tough to really figure out what happened here because
Yeah.
Emily, she could have used three different names within the span of 4 years. She went from
Yes.
Emily Jordan to Emily Richards. She goes back to her original name, Emily Jordan, but then she gets married to a guy, Bruce Richards, whose real name, at least at that point, then would have been John O'Brien. And she could have
Right.
gone to Emily O'Brien, but then she went by Roberta instead of Emily. So I think
Yeah.
everybody's starting to see why you really have had your work cut out for you,
Yes.
Amy, for sure. Okay, so they get married. No information after that. You say you have Social Security information for Emily. I know this is a sensitive topic, but I have to ask: what about any Social Security information for Bruce/John? Anything?
Um, I have his original. I have the social security number he used when he died
Okay.
through the Social Security Index. Um, I I do not have information to his original one when he was Bruce Richards.
Okay.
Um, there is one, obviously, and there could possibly be two, depending on when he was issued one for the military.
Okay. All right.
So
So it's
he has at
possible
least
that,
two.
all right, but you have no work records for him getting paid any money between roughly 66 and when he ended up getting married that next time.
The only thing that I have is that in the early, I'd have to go back to my notes. In the early 70s, He did receive Social Security, like insurance, maybe, I think, like
Okay.
SSI. I'm not sure what that
Disabled.
is.
Okay. Disabled or something. Sure.
Through a railroad pension.
Huh.
In a certain age, certain years, he worked for the Illinois Railroad.
All right. So this would have been going back to his Illinois days then.
Yes. And I actually the records came up actually on Ancestry. And I applied for a FOIA request through the railroad, and they keep telling me they don't have that record, and I'm like, well, you released the record.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it's somewhere. Um, yeah. So I'm not sure, but I do know they were paid out through the railroad.
Okay.
So wages
It's,
earned
but
through
still
the railroad.
between 1966 and 1975, it's basically a blank sort of history pretty much for
Yep,
we don't
on where
for
he
Emily
is.
and Bruce. I'm just going to keep calling them Emily and Bruce. That'll
Yeah.
keep it easy. No
Okay.
proof that they ever bought a house. No proof that
Nope.
they ever lived in, let's just pick a state, North Carolina. No idea if they went and lived overseas. Nothing like that.
Nope. There's nothing. Which
Okay.
it actually surprised me on their marriage certificate. They don't have the same address.
Hmm.
So it led me to believe maybe she got there before he did. But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know.
Yeah, if he moved out there, why didn't he just move in with her? That's a good question. We don't
Right.
know. Okay. But we can't forget though, he did end up getting married in 1976. This is a marriage we've already talked about. But here's the big
Yeah.
deal. Is there any proof that Emily and Bruce ever got divorced?
I have not been able to find anything.
Okay. In addition, if everybody's really, 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 really paying attention to every small detail in this interview, they got married in 66, but technically he wasn't divorced until 67 from his first wife.
Correct.
All right. So maybe this is just his modus operandi.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, he would have known it wouldn't have been a valid marriage anyways.
right. Okay. So they get married. It gets annulled in 79. Does he get married again after that?
No.
All right. So he is a single man, as far as you can tell, from 79. And unfortunately, he died in 2009.
Correct.
So just before you started doing all of this, that's
Yep.
unfortunate timing. Okay.
Trust me, I know.
What about his two ex-wives? Has anybody attempted to talk to them? Or I think they're both deceased now too. But maybe if you had a chance to speak to them before they died within the last few years, did you have a chance to talk to them? Anybody talk to them? Anybody anything like that?
No, basically by the time I knew, of the next marriage, we were past the time where everyone had already passed away.
Wow.
So I wasn't able to ever talk to either wife. But I did track down nieces to each wife, and was
Yeah.
able to learn a little bit of information through them.
Yeah. What was that?
Um, so the first wife, um, it sounds like, she was a tough cookie.
Mhm.
Sailor's mouth, said things just how they were.
Ah.
Um, the niece had explained to me that she knew that she had been looking for him to file for the divorce, that he was a drunk. He was basically abandoned the marriage, never around. And so she had filed for that divorce. And at one point was either flying to Florida or was going to fly to Florida to
Mhm.
meet him, but never got on the plane to go.
Hmm.
Um, when asked if she thought, if she would have anything to do with Emily's disappearance, she had said she wouldn't put it past her.
Wow. Okay, this is what the niece said.
Yeah.
Okay, if she knew that Bruce went to California, married another woman when they were still married, although it sounds like the paperwork all got started in 1962. Maybe there's some sort
Hmm.
of jealousy or something there.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's interesting to me that she could track down Bruce, but the FBI couldn't.
Yeah.
Maybe that needs to be figured into this as
Hmm.
well. Are you even aware, like for wife number three, was she even aware? Is the best you can tell that Emily ever even existed? Did Bruce ever even talk about it?
No, no, not, niece never said anything. She basically said, um, she was never really around them. Um, she was very young. She had just gotten out of college and just got married. They would drive through and visit, but Alice, the third wife, would, come see them at a restaurant. John wouldn't be there. He just wasn't around,
Okay,
is what she said.
okay,
I did contact the third wife's half brother who lived in New York, and he kind of said the same thing. It sounded like he only knew of John's character just from what Alice had told him, and that he was an awful drunk, drank all the time, um, and that they got divorced. She filed for divorce or the annulment because he was using a fake name.
okay. And what she was. I guess he's
Yeah.
officially changed it, but on the other hand, how would you feel if you got married to somebody and after you married them found out that they lived the first half of their life with a different name and maybe then you start thinking, what was going on here? Okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like Bruce was much of a treat anyway. Maybe if he had been a good
No.
guy, nice guy treating her well, then she wouldn't have done that. But maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back there in 1979, possibly.
Hmm.
Okay. What did Bruce do with the rest of his life? Was he working? You talked about him being on SSI for a while. Already said that he died in 2009. Did he continue to work? Did he get in trouble with the law? Anything you've been able to find out for the 80s, 90s, and 2000s for him?
I don't. I really don't have anything except for that he remained living with his late wife. Um,
Hmm.
and up until the death certificate, it states that he was a salesman in the automobile and sales and leasing industry. So I don't know if that
Okay.
was like makes sense from Chicago because that's what he did in Chicago. And that's
Right.
what he knew best. And that's still to this day very easy to get into and out of and back into. So
Okay.
um I
Okay.
haven't really looked for much. I know I did come across a record, wasn't a record, sorry, it was a newspaper article of a vehicle for sale, and the contact name was John O'Brien. But a million John O'Briens in
Could go.
California, so
That's right. Could be him. Could not be him. What about
yeah.
his obituary when he died in 2009? Was it very descriptive? Was there any mention that he actually used to be known as Bruce Richards? Anything like that?
No obituary.
No obituary. All right. So just the death certificate. No preceded in death by anything like that, which sometimes can be very helpful in tracking people down. I've done that many times.
Yeah,
Okay, what
no.
about the roommate? Is the roommate of Emily still alive here in 2023?
Um, so I actually have not been able to locate the roommate. We only had a first name of Pat, which could have been short for Patricia.
Could have been.
Um, First guess, million
Hmm.
others, you never
Yeah.
know. And then we have a letter that Emily wrote to her mom, um, dated like the last day of February 1964. And in it, she states that she still hadn't heard from Patricia. She hoped that she had found a new place and got the classes she was hoping for.
Okay.
The end. So no last name, not sure what that pertains to other than 1964. They're not actually living together. So
Okay.
there's a
All right. So we don't know if she's still alive. We don't know if she's dead. And even so, if you
right,
can track her down and she still had, good memories that, she's in Illinois and the last information you have is that Emily was in California.
right.
Okay. And you've already talked about Bruce's brother, who talked about him changing his name, which was true, but you did tell me though that Bruce's brother has had a lot of troubles with a lot too.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
During the majority of this time, all of it, he was in prison himself, so he was very disconnected from what was happening with his older brother.
Are we then to believe then that this brother knew that Bruce changed his name? How do we then decipher all of that? Did he know that Bruce went to California? Did he know about Bruce getting married to Emily? Was this just like a family secret or something? How would you assess it?
Um, he had told my father that he knew that the Bruce was in California, John Bruce, however you want to say his name.
Yeah.
Um, that at some point, and I'm thinking probably when Glenn got out of prison, that he said his brother had sent him money from California,
Hmm.
like $500.
Okay.
And at that time, that's when he knew, one, he was in California, and two, he had an alias or a different name. He was living under a different name.
Okay.
Um,
But was he aware of Emily that I guess what I'm asking is your family was thinking she was missing in 1964, but did Bruce's brother know that he had gone to California and married a woman named Emily?
No, no, he
No.
he claimed he never knew anything about Emily.
Okay. And the brother was in Illinois?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so everybody thinks she disappears in 64, but she gets married in 66, but then she goes missing again.
Yep.
Just the records of the 21st century not able to track these things down. I'm guessing they lived somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
it could be open to a lot of different ideas out there. Of course, we hope that Emily is still alive out there somewhere, but given that she had no problem changing her names, just like John did or Bruce did, we have a lot of different possibilities here. On top of the fact that it doesn't seem you haven't been able to find that he and Emily ever got divorced
No.
before he got married again. Okay.
And no,
She's
and it
still
just really
missing.
helps us to
Please.
why they could even use those names.
Yeah, just change the names and then you go back. You're almost asking to get caught, but they
Yeah.
didn't. It seems, at least as far as we know, or at least you're the expert. As far as you know, they didn't get caught, or she didn't get caught. Bruce did his time.
Right.
All right. So, okay. Let's move on to this. Let's go back to you a little bit, Amy. You've been working on this for over 10 years. This is something that's important to you. This is a family member, although you never personally met her. What kind of tips can you give to people who are using Ancestry or similar databases, are dealing with state government, state bureaucracies trying to get records and things like that? Because that is, for some people, that's an important part of trying to figure out what happened to the disappearance, especially one going back to the 1960s. Any tips, anything like that you can pass along to the audience?
Um, I guess just being persistent. I use a lot of county websites. I register for them to get, tax documents on property taxes, because in sales, records of sales
Yeah.
is constant, so you can pull those and get names and dates. So I've done a lot of research that way. I use different, just online platforms to find people and phone numbers and addresses, and just chase them down. I've used Ancestry a lot to build trees on random people, just to make sure that they're not the person I'm looking for. So I do a lot of ruling out to rule in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, I mean, there's a lot of online resources. There's, if you're not in the county or in the state, they have online request portals that you can use at the state level, county level, city, libraries. Libraries hold tons of documents,
Right.
directories, phone directories, reverse directories. I mean, I'm even taking it as far as to find a person who collected phone books out of Chicago for like a 30-year time span
Wow.
and, contacted him via email and, we made contact over the phone and he would search it for me and tell me who was on that address and that year that he had. Like that was like eBay. I used eBay.
Wow.
So, where do you find a document that's so old that might be now a collector's item?
Yep.
eBay.
Yes. Right.
So, I'm just being so far away from Chicago, I've just used every online resource possible.
But you are, I don't know if we want to get into where you live, but you are close to California. Have you thought about driving down? No, we should say Bruce is deceased, but he did not die in the LA area. He just died up in Northern California, San Jose, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. Have you thought about driving down to LA County, or is that something you can just do online to go through, like you were saying, like old phone books? If you were to go through a phone book from 1968 in LA, what are the odds of finding a phone number for or they usually have an address for a Bruce Richards or Emily Richards or something like that. Have you thought about that, or is that on the things to do?
I've searched, the online indexes for that.
Hmm.
But, there's nothing for her, those names. I mean, there are those names, and I've
Hmm.
researched, Emily O'Brien and Emily Richards and Emily Jordan. And I created the trees for them, did the addresses, searched them back, and they're not her. So the one Emily Richards that I tracked ended up, she died in like the early 70s. And so I was like, well, I mean, it's possible, but she
Yeah,
was born in like 1922, like,
right. Way older.
so
Yeah.
eliminating by just tracking every name possible. But that John Ryan O'Brien one is just impossible. There's like pages and pages of them.
And that very well may be the reason he picked that name at the
Yeah.
time.
Yes. Yeah. Could be. Very
Uh,
popular name.
right, right. Johnny picked the most popular, at least at the time, name in the United States. And
Yes.
then O'Brien, a very common name in the United States as well. Not as common as Smith or Brown, but it's certainly up there.
Yeah.
He did that for a reason. That's true.
Yep. Yep. To
Okay.
stay elusive.
Okay. So of course, you've been working on this. Where do you think your investigation needs to go next? Have you thought about that? Obviously, it already sounds like you've done so much. What's next?
Um, I think for me, and I'm still focusing on this, but that time frame from 1966 to like 1974, 75, when he pops up with the late wife, that's 10
Hmm.
years that I believe he's still in California.
Yeah.
And I think he's in that San Jose little hub somewhere, LA, San Jose, San Francisco, like somewhere right there on the coast. I think he's there somewhere and he's probably in the auto industry, um, or the in, I would
Hmm.
maybe restaurant and the bar industry, but I'm kind of leaning more towards the auto because he's older. So,
Hmm.
and that's what the late wife put on his thing. So I'm guessing either he was still doing it or she at least met him when he was. So that's what she reported on there.
Okay.
But at this point, it would be newspaper articles, maybe, or I don't even know.
Right.
But he's got to be there somewhere.
I'm thinking like, for example, California uh, property records, like homes or pieces of land. Of course, that's your business, construction and homes and real estate and things.
Yeah.
How is California, for example, regarding home sales going back to the mid to late 60s.
I mean, it's documented. If I found an address, I could contact the county and probably get the tax records. Sales agreements, that's all public record.
Mm-hmm.
Easier to get in person, but you can still manage to get them online.
Mm-hmm. Looking
Um,
for a John O'Brien who bought a house 66, 67 because that was a common thing to do for people. Maybe not today. People get married and still live in apartments for a while. It's fine too. But it's more
mhm.
common in the 1960s. You get married, you absolutely buy a house, if not before that. I guess that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see him as owning a house by himself. I more see him in what he'd been living in prior places. So, a small apartment,
And it's interesting you bring
more
that up
common.
because I know when I was looking at some things as well, when he got married to his third wife, she owned the house, right?
She owned the house.
He kind of moved in with her,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All
She
right.
had already
So
owned it.
right. All right. So we have to keep that
Yep.
in mind too. Okay. Amy, do you have a Facebook page, anything like that set up for Emily's disappearance? If so, why don't you mention it right now?
I do. It is just under, I think you could search my name and find it, or it's under missing persons Emily Roberta Jordan. I
Missing
think that's what I
persons,
have it under.
Emily Roberta Jordan. So you are using her maiden name, the name she was born with.
Yes. Let me see
Okay.
if I can find it here real quick.
Go ahead.
Not too much activity on there, so I'm not
That's
on there
fine.
very much. Um, missing person, Emily Roberta Richards. And I have
Okay.
Jordan. It's both.
Okay, it's both. Well, I can understand. Given what we've been talking about for the last hour and a half, I can understand why it'd be hard to pick one name over the other. Missing
Yeah.
person, Emily Roberta Jordan Richards.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody wants to go to the Facebook page and check that out. And of course, that's always a good resource to get people's attention for all of this. Amy, any final words before we complete this interview?
Um, I don't think so. I appreciate it getting out there though,
Okay.
for sure.
You're very welcome. I'm hoping some people, maybe in California, can offer some insight. Maybe they have access to some things there that can step up and help you out with all of this. I think even though it sounds like they were doing this illegal business with people in Florida, I think, near where I live, that I think the
Hmm.
answer to this does exist in California, being that that's where they got married. She was living there. She had lived there for a couple years waiting for Bruce. And then when he died, he's living in California as well. He
Hmm.
when he married this other woman, he was still in California. It just seems everything points to that state. It seems.
Yeah. Yes. I agree.
Well, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Well, thank you very much. My family definitely appreciates the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right, that's it. All done, Amy. Very good
Alrighty.
job. Great job. Wow, that is a
Thanks.
mystery. That's a tough one. It's a tough one. All these
Hmm.
different changes of names, and somebody going, I guess we could call dark, like Bruce did for 6 years. If all this information up to 66, then boom, nothing until 75.
Yeah.
Is he getting paid under the table? Was because at least we can be pretty sure that he was using John O'Brien during that time, even though it's a very common name.
Yeah.
That he did use it when he got married. Those years later. So you have to believe that's what he was using during that time.
I know, right?
Yeah. So, but you're
I
right.
know I've saved some records like newspaper articles um with the names, but I've never, really been able to pin it to being
Mm-hmm.
him. So
Yeah.
obviously his name is more common and so it just pops up a lot.
It just doesn't seem that he'd be up getting, if he was working for a car dealership out there, it just doesn't seem that he would be getting paid under the table. Just don't see that. I just
Yeah.
can't
Oh,
see.
so here I was going to mention this. The railroad. So it's the U.S. Chicago and Northwestern Railroad employment records. And it is using his Bruce Arthur Richards, so his original birth name. The birth date is March 3rd, 1928, which he's March 3rd, 1931. So
Hmm.
that's the original change. I mean, his hire date was 1950, and the avenue is Kedzie Avenue, which is the avenue where it's the address where his family lived. So I know it's him. So that's the records that I went to request. And when I requested them, they said they didn't have that record. I'm like, I literally am giving you what you gave to the census. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just
What
weird.
railroad is this?
This is
CSX? What is it? Pacific?
Chicago Northwestern Railroad.
Okay.
So back in the 50s, it was Chicago and Northwestern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't know.
I know.
You have these employment records, all these things, once again, from 66. You know, I'm not so conspiratorial to think that, well, he killed Emily and then he managed to keep himself off the radar for all of these years. I do not believe it's that. It has to be something else. It has to be some other reason that, you just can't find a place, an address for him or something like that.
Yeah.
He's not that disciplined a guy. I mean, he goes to jail and then he goes to California and then uses his other name again. I mean, and he did get caught doing that scam that they were involved in. So you have to have made, if he was trying to cover up his tracks or something, he had to have made some mistakes somewhere. I guess that's my attitude. Okay. Well, Amy, please keep me posted on this, on all of this. And if there's anything I can offer, obviously you have a pretty good grasp on this with all the ancestry and everything. But like I told you before, I think my missing persons experience tells me that if you were to find a place, a house that they bought, and no matter how big the yard was or something like that, and I'm inclined to believe, if we're to believe that he harmed, the thing is, Emily could have died of cancer for all we know. She could have. But if we're to believe that he harmed her in some way for whatever reason, my instincts tell me that he probably put her right there on that property. Right? If you were to find that, that would be my first choice. Just so you know. So you keep me posted. Of course, as facts change, theories change. You never know when you're going to run into, something.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Amy, good talking to you today. Like I said, keep me posted. And this will come out next Friday. I will send you the YouTube link the day before.
Okay.
All right, through your email.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, great job. Thank you.
All right, have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. And that was my February 1st, 2023 interview with Amy Spanfelner, cousin of Emily Roberta Richards. I thank her for appearing on both audio and video for this episode. That's the second Amy in 3 weeks, and next week's guest also has the name Amy. I don't know how these things happen. There's so much I could talk about regarding Emily's disappearance. Lots of facets, lots of angles, but I'm going to keep this summation to one general thought and one specific one. I'll start with the former first. For disappearances this old, whether they have all the twists and turns of Emily's or not, we start to see the limitations of digital data. Certainly what Amy found on Ancestry regarding Emily's marriage to Bruce is spectacular. Great work on her part. However, if this disappearance were even just 20 years newer, taking it into the 1980s, there would certainly be no issues finding out where the two lived after getting married, where they worked, and all sorts of other information. And this would even be like 10 years before the internet became widely accessible. But as I've encountered with my own work I do privately on disappearances, when I start to get back to the early 80s and late 70s, that is where the public info that can be found on online databases such as White Pages or People Looker can really start to become sparse. And ancestry for these situations is not much better. For example, had Bruce and Emily gotten married in any of several other states in 1966, Amy would not have found that record because several states do not make marriage licenses public. And not to be negative, but I think this is the way it will always be for the internet once we go back to the 1970s and earlier. Searches will always be a crapshoot. I guess you can always show up in person at some government building to go through microfiche and old manila folders if you'd like. As for a specific point about Emily's disappearance, despite being deceased, Bruce, aka John, is the key to figuring out what happened to Emily. Why? Because we know he lived until 2009. And although there may not be any records on the internet, I'm inclined to believe in some filing cabinet somewhere in Florida, in California, wherever, there is a record of where he lived between 1966 and 1975. And that will be the next leap forward in Amy's work. But I totally hear what she was saying during the interview. There are a ton of John O'Briens out there. But surely one is more than meets the eye. I'll leave the public theorizing up to you.
And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.